Thank you for tuning in to Kino Reads Goosebumps. Today I'll be reading The Headless Ghost by R.L.Stine. Part 2 of 2, Chapter 15. "Who's there?" I choked out. Stephanie squeezed my arm so hard it hurt, but I made no attempt to move away from her. I heard soft footsteps, ghostly footsteps. A cold chill froze the back of my neck. I clamped my jaw shut to keep my teeth from chattering. And then yellow eyes floated towards us through the thick darkness. 4 yellow eyes. The creature had 4 eyes. A gurgling sound escaped my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I stared straight ahead, listening, watching. The eyes floated apart in pairs. 2 eyes moved to the right, 2 to the left. "No!" I cried out when I saw more eyes. Yellow eyes in the corners of the room. Evil eyes glinting at us from against the wall. Yellow eyes all along the floor. Yellow eyes all around us, cat-like yellow eyes glaring in silence at Stephanie and me. We huddled together in the centre of the room. Cat-like eyes. Cat's eyes. Because the room was filled with cats. A shrill yow gave them away. A long meow from the windowsill made Stephanie and me both sigh in relief. A cat brushed against my leg. Startled, I jumped aside, bumping into Stephanie. She bumped me back. More cats meowed. Another cat brushed the back of my jeans leg. I think these cats are lonely," Stephanie stammered. "Do you think anyone ever comes up here?" "I don't care," I snapped. "All these yellow eyes floating around? I thought, well, I don't know what I thought. It's creepy. Let's get out of here." For once, Stephanie didn't argue. She led the way to the door at the back of the room. All around us, cats were howling and yowling. Another one brushed my leg. Stephanie tripped over a cat. In the darkness, I saw her fall. She landed on her knees with a hard thud. The cats all began to screech. "Are you okay?" I cried, hurrying to help pull her up. The cats were howling so loud I couldn't hear her reply. We jogged to the door, pulled it open, and escaped. I closed the door behind us. Silence now. "Where are we?" I whispered. I don't know," Stephanie stammered, keeping close to the wall. I moved to a tall, narrow window and peered through the dusty glass. The window led out to a small balcony. The balcony jutted out from the grey shingled roof. Pale white moonlight washed in through the window. I turned back to Stephanie. "We're in some kind of a back hallway," I guessed. The long, narrow hallway seemed to stretch on forever. "Maybe these rooms are used by the workers, Manny, the night watchman, the house cleaners, and the tour guides." Stephanie sighed. She stared down the long hallway. "Let's go downstairs and find Otto and the tour group. I think we've done enough exploring for tonight." I agreed. There must be stairs at the end of this hall. Let's go. I took 4 or 5 steps. Then I felt the ghostly hands. They brushed over my face, my neck, my body. Sticky, dry, invisible hands. The hands pushed me back as they clung to my skin. "Ah, help!" Stephanie moaned. The ghosts had her in their grasp too. The ghost's filmy hands brushed over me. I could feel the soft fingers, dry and soft as air, tighten around my skin. Stephanie's hands thrashed wildly beside me. In the dark hall, she struggled to free herself. "It's like a net," she choked out. I swiped at my face, my hair. I spun away, but the dry fingers clung to me, tightening. And then I realised we hadn't walked into a ghost's grasp. Tugging and tearing frantically with both hands, I realised that we had both walked into cobwebs. A thick curtain of cobwebs. The blanket of sticky threads had fallen over us like a fisherman's net. The more we struggled, the tighter it wrapped itself around us. "Stephanie, it's cobwebs," I cried. I tugged a thick, stringy wad of them off of my face. "Of course it's cobwebs," she shot back, squirming and thrashing. "What did you think it was?" A ghost?" I muttered. Stephanie sniggered. "Dwayne, you know you have a good imagination. But if you start seeing ghosts everywhere, we'll never get out of here." I didn't know what to say. Stephanie had thought the same thing I did. She thought she had been grabbed by a ghost. But now she was pretending she knew all along. We stood there in the darkness, tearing the sticky threads off of our faces and arms and bodies. I let out an angry groan. I couldn't brush the stuff from my hair. "I'm going to itch forever," I wailed. I've got more bad news for you, Stephanie murmured. I pulled a thick wad off of my ear. Huh? Who do you think made these cobwebs? I didn't have to think about it. Spiders? My arms and legs started to tingle. My back began to itch. I felt a light tingling on the back of my neck. Were there spiders crawling up and down my body? Hundreds and hundreds of them. Forgetting the wispy strings of cobweb, I started to run. Stephanie had the same idea. We both ran down the long hall, scratching and slapping at ourselves. Steph, the next time you have a great idea, don't have a great idea, I warned her. Let's just get out of here, she groaned. We reached the end of the hall, still scratching as we ran. No stairway. How do we get back downstairs? Another hall twisted to the left. Low candles over the doorways flickered and danced. Shadows darted over the worn carpet like slithering animals. Come on! I pulled Stephanie's arm. We had no choice. We had to follow this hallway too. We jogged side by side. The rooms were all dark and silent. The candle flames dipped as we ran past. Our long shadows ran ahead of us, as if eager to get downstairs first. I stopped when I heard someone laughing. Whoa, Stephanie murmured, breathing hard. Her dark eyes grew wide. We both listened hard. I heard voices inside the room at the end of the hall. The door was closed. I couldn't make out the words. I heard a man say something, a woman laughed, and other people laughed too. We caught up with the tour, I whispered. Stephanie scrunched up her face. But the tour never comes up here to the top floor, she protested. We stepped up close to the door and listened again. More laughter on the other side. A lot of people talking cheerfully. All at the same time. It sounded like a party. I pressed my ear against the door. I think the tour ended and everyone is just chatting, I whispered. Stephanie scratched the back of her neck. She pulled a stringy gob of cobweb from her hair. Well, hurry, Dwayne. Open the door. Let's join them, she urged. I hope Otto doesn't ask us where we've been, I replied. I grabbed the doorknob and pushed open the door. Stephanie and I took a step inside and gasped in shock at what we saw. The room stood empty. Empty, silent and dark. What happened? Where is everyone? Stephanie cried. We took another step into the dark room. The floor creaked beneath us. The only sound. I don't get it, Stephanie whispered. Didn't we just hear voices in here? Lots, I said. They were laughing and talking. It really sounded like a party. A big party, Stephanie added, her eyes darting around the empty room. Tons of people. A cold chill ran down the back of my neck. I don't think we heard people, I whispered. Stephanie turned to me. Huh? They weren't people, I croaked. They were ghosts. Her mouth dropped open, and they all disappeared when we opened the door. I nodded. I think I can still feel them in here. I can feel their presence. Stephanie let out a frightened squeak. Feel them? What do you mean? At that moment, a cold wind came whooshing through the room. It rushed over me cold and dry. It chilled me down to my toes. Stephanie must have felt it too. She wrapped her arms round her chest. Do you feel that breeze? Is the window open? How come it's so cold in here all of a sudden? She asked. She shivered again. Her voice became tiny. We're not alone in here, are we? I don't think so, I whispered. I think we just crashed someone's party. Stephanie and I stood there, feeling the cold of the room. I didn't dare move. Maybe a ghost was standing right beside me. Maybe the ghosts we heard were all around us, staring at us, preparing to swoop over us. Stephanie, I whispered, what if we really have crashed their party? What if we've invaded the ghost's quarters? Stephanie swallowed hard. She didn't reply. Hadn't Andrew, the ghost boy, lost his head when he stumbled into the ghost's living quarters? We were standing in the same living quarters. The same room where Andrew found the ghost of the old sea captain. Stephanie, I think we should get out of here, I said softly. Now. I wanted to run. I wanted to fly down the stairs, fly out of Hill House, fly to my safe, warm home, where there were no ghosts. No ghosts. We spun around and bolted for the door. Were the ghosts going to try and stop us? No. We made it back to the flickering orange light of the hallway. I pulled the door shut behind us. The stairs! Where are the stairs? Stephanie cried. We stood at the end of the hall, facing a solid wall. The flowers on the wallpaper appeared to open and close, moving in the darting candlelight. I banged both fists against the wall. How do we get out of here? How? Stephanie had already pulled open a door across the hall. I followed her inside. Oh no! Ghostly figures filled the room. It took me a few seconds to realise that I was staring at sheets pulled over the furniture. Chairs and sofas covered with sheets. Maybe this is the ghost living room, I stammered. Stephanie didn't hear me. She had already burst through the open door against the far wall. I followed her into another room, cluttered with large crates. The crates were piled neatly to the ceiling. Another room, then another. My heart began to pound. My throat ached. I felt so discouraged. Were we ever going to find our way to the stairs? Another door. Another dark, empty room. Hey, Steph, I whispered. I think we're going in circles. Out into a long, twisting hallway. More candles, more flowers flickering darkly on the wallpaper. We ran side by side down the hall until we came to a door. I hadn't seen it before. A door with a horseshoe nailed onto it. Maybe it meant that our luck was about to change. I sure hoped so. I grabbed the knob with a trembling hand. I pulled open the door. A staircase! Yes, I cried. Finally, Stephanie gasped. This must be the servants' staircase, I guessed. Maybe we've been in the servants' quarters all this time. The stairway was blanketed in darkness. The stairs looked steep. I took a step down, holding on to the wall. Then another step. Stephanie had one hand on my shoulder. When I stepped down, she stepped down too. Another step. Another. The soft thuds of our trainers echoed in the deep stairwell. We had taken about 10 steps when I heard footsteps. Someone coming up the stairs. Stephanie bumped me hard. I shot out both hands, grabbed the wall to keep me from falling down the stairs. No time to turn and run. The footsteps grew louder and heavier. Light from an electric torch swept over Stephanie, then me. Squinting against the light, I saw a dark figure climbing up to us. So there you are! His voice boomed, echoing in the stairwell. A familiar voice. Otto! Stephanie and I both cried. He bounced up in front of us, moving the torch from her face to mine. What are you two doing up here? He demanded breathlessly. We got lost, I answered quickly. We got separated from the tour, Stephanie added. We tried to find you. Yes, we tried, I chimed in. We were searching everywhere, but we couldn't catch up with the group. Otto lowered the torch. I could see his tiny dark eyes narrowing at us. I don't think he believed our story. I thought you two knew my tour by heart, he said, rubbing his chin. We do, Stephanie insisted. We lost our bearings, we got lost and we... But how did you get up here on the rooftop floor? Otto demanded. Well, I started, but I couldn't think of a good answer. I turned back to Stephanie on the step above me. We heard voices up here. We thought it was you, she told Otto. It wasn't exactly a lie. We did hear voices. Otto lowered the beam of light to the stairs. Well, let's get back downstairs. No one is allowed on this floor. It's private. Sorry, Stephanie and I muttered. Watch your step, kids, Otto warned. These back stairs are very steep and rickety. I'll lead you back to the group. Edna took over for me while I went to find you. Edna was our second favourite tour guide. She was old and white-haired, very pale and frail-looking, especially in her black tour guide outfit. But she was a great storyteller. With her quivering old voice, she really made you believe every frightening story she told you. Stephanie and I eagerly clumped down the stairs, following Otto. His torch swept in front of us as he led us out to the first floor. We followed a long hallway, a hallway I knew very well. We stopped outside Joseph Craw's study. Joseph was Andrew's father. I peeked inside. A bright fire blazed in the fireplace. Edna stood beside the fireplace telling the tragic story of Joseph Craw to the tour group. Stephanie and I had heard the sad story 100 times. A year after Andrew had had his head stolen, Joseph came home late one winter night. He took off his coat, then moved to the fireplace to warm himself. No one knows how Joseph was burnt up. At least, that's how Otto, Edna, and the other guides tell the story. Was he pushed into the fireplace? Did he fall in? One guess is as good as another. But when the maid came to the study the next morning, she found a horrifying sight. She found 2 charred, blackened hands gripping the mantel, 2 hands holding on tightly to the marble mantelpiece. All that was left of Joseph Craw. It's a yucky story, isn't it? It gives me a chill every time I hear it. As Otto led us to the study, Edna was just getting to the sickening part, the ending. "Do you want to rejoin the group?" Otto whispered. "It's pretty late. I think we'd better get home," Stephanie told him. I quickly agreed. "Thanks for rescuing us. We'll catch the tour again soon." "Good night," Otto said, clicking off his torch. "You know the way out." He hurried into the study. I started to leave, but stopped when I saw the boy again, the pale boy with the wavy blonde hair, the boy in the black jeans and black turtleneck. He stood away from the tour group, close to the door, and he was staring at Stephanie and me again, staring hard at us, a cold expression on his face. "Come on," I whispered, grabbing Stephanie's arm. I tugged her away from the study door. We quickly found the front stairway. A few seconds later, we pushed open the front door and stepped outside. A cold wind greeted us. We started down the hill. Wisps of black cloud floated like snakes over the moon. "Well, that was fun," Stephanie declared. She zipped her coat up to her chin. "Fun?" I wasn't so sure. It was kind of scary. Stephanie grinned at me. "But we weren't afraid, right?" I shivered. "Right. I'd like to go back and explore some more," she said. "You know, maybe go to that room with all the voices, find some real ghosts." "Yeah, great," I agreed. I didn't feel like arguing with her. I felt pretty tired. She pulled a wool scarf from her coat pocket. As she swung it around her neck, one end caught in a low pine bush. "Hey!" she cried out. I moved to the bush and started to pull the scarf free, and that's when I heard the voice. Just a whisper from the other side of the bush, but I heard it very clearly. "Did you find my head?" That's what I heard. "Did you find my head? Did you find it for me?" I uttered a startled gasp and stared into the bush. "Stephanie, did you hear that?" I choked out. No reply. "Stephanie, Steph!" I spun around. She was staring at me, her mouth open in surprise. "Did you hear that whisper?" I asked again. Then I realized she wasn't staring at me. She was staring past me. I turned and saw the strange, blonde boy standing there beside the pine bush. "Hey, did you just whisper to us?" I demanded sharply. He narrowed his pale grey eyes at me. "Huh? Me?" "Yeah, you," I snapped. "Were you trying to scare us?" He shook his head. "No way." "You didn't whisper from behind this bush?" I asked again. "I only just got out here," the boy insisted. "We saw him in Joseph Craw's study less than a minute ago," I told myself. "How did he get out here so fast?" "Why did you follow us?" Stephanie demanded, shoving her scarf around her coat collar. The boy shrugged. "Why were you staring at us?" I asked, stepping up close to Stephanie. The wind howled over the hilltop. The row of pine bushes shook in the gusty wind as if shivering. Thin black clouds continued to snake their way over the pale moon. The boy wore no coat, only the black turtleneck and black jeans. The wind fluttered his long, wavy hair. "We saw you staring at us," Stephanie repeated. "How come?" He shrugged again. He kept his strange grey eyes down at the ground. "I saw you sneak away," he said. "I wondered if you saw anything interesting." "We got lost," I told him, glancing at Stephanie. "We didn't see much." "What's your name?" Stephanie asked. "Seth," he replied. We told him our names. "Do you live in Wheeler Falls?" Stephanie asked. He shook his head. He kept his eyes down at his shoes. "No, I'm just visiting." Why wouldn't he look us in the eye? Was he just shy? "Are you sure you didn't whisper something from behind that bush?" I asked again. He shook his head. "No way, maybe someone was playing a joke on you." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer and kicking the bush. I don't know what I expected, but nothing happened. "You and Stephanie went exploring on your own?" Seth asked. "Yeah, a little," I confessed. "We're kind of into ghosts." When I said that, he jerked his head up. He raised his grey eyes and gazed hard at Stephanie, then at me. His face had been a blank, no life to it, no expression at all, but now I could see that he was really excited. "Do you want to see some real ghosts?" he asked, staring hard. Do you? Seth stared at us as if challenging us. Do you want to see some real ghosts? Yeah, sure, Stephanie replied, returning his stare. What do you mean, Seth? I demanded. Have you ever seen a ghost? He nodded. Yeah, in there. He pointed with his head back to the big stone house. Huh? I cried. You saw a real ghost in Hill House? When? Dwayne and I have taken the tour 100 times, Stephanie told him. We've never seen any ghosts in there. He sniggered. Of course not. Do you think the ghosts come out when the tour group are in there? They wait till the house is closed. They wait until the tourists go home. How do you know? I asked. I sneaked in, Seth replied. Late one night. You what? I cried. How? I found a door around the back. It was unlocked. I guess everyone forgot about it, Seth explained. I sneaked in after the house was closed and I... He stopped suddenly. His eyes were on the house. I turned and saw the front door open. People stepped out, fastening their coats. The last tour had ended. People were heading for home. Over here, Seth whispered. We followed him behind the pine bushes and ducked down low. The people walked past us. They were laughing and talking about the house and all the ghost stories. When they were down the hill, we stood up again. Steph brushed his long hair off his forehead, but the wind blew it right back. I sneaked in late at night, when the house was dark, he repeated. Your parents let you go out so late at night? I asked. A strange smile crossed his lips. They didn't know, he said softly. The smile faded. Your parents let you two out? Stephanie laughed. Our parents don't know either. Good, Seth replied. And you really saw a ghost? I asked. He nodded, brushed his hair back again. I crept past Manny, the night watchman. He was sound asleep, snoring away. I made my way to the front of the house. I was standing at the bottom of the big staircase when I heard a laugh. I gulped. A laugh? From the top of the stairs. I backed up against the wall and I saw the ghost. A very old lady in a long dress and a black bonnet. She wore a heavy black veil over the front of her face, but I could see her eyes through the veil. I could see them because they glowed bright red, like fire. Whoa, Stephanie cried. What did she do? Seth turned to the house. The front door had closed. The lantern over the door had been put out. The house stood in total darkness. The old ghost came sliding down a banister, he reported. She tossed back her head and screamed all the way down. And as she slid, her red eyes left a bright trail like the trail of a comet. Weren't you scared? I asked Seth. Didn't you try to run away? There was no time, he replied. She came sliding down the banister right towards me, eyes blazing, screaming like some kind of crazed animal. I was pressed against the wall. I couldn't move. And when she reached the bottom, I thought she'd grab me. But she vanished, disappeared into the darkness, and all that was left was the faint red glow floating in the air, the glow of her eyes. Oh, wow, Stephanie cried. That's amazing. I agreed. I want to sneak back in again, Seth declared, watching the house. I'll bet there are more ghosts in there. I really want to see them. Me too, Stephanie cried eagerly. Seth smiled at her. So you'll come with me? Tomorrow night? I don't want to go back alone. It'll be so much more fun if you come too. The wind swirled sharply. The black clouds rolled over the moon, covering it, shutting out its light. The old house appeared to grow darker on its hilltop perch. So you'll come with me tomorrow night? Seth asked again. Yeah, great, Stephanie told him. I can't wait. How about you, Dwayne? She turned to me. You'll come too, won't you, Dwayne? Won't you? I said yes. I said I couldn't wait to see a real ghost. I said I was only shivering because of the cold wind, not because I was scared. We made a plan to meet at midnight tomorrow at the back of Hill House. Then Seth hurried away and Stephanie and I walked home. The street was dark and empty. Most of the house lights were out. Far in the distance, a dog howled. Stephanie and I walked quickly, leaning into the wind. We usually didn't stay out this late. Tomorrow night would be even later. I don't trust that guy, I told Stephanie as we reached the front garden. He's too weird. I expected her to agree, but she said, You're just jealous, Dwayne. Huh? Me? Jealous? I couldn't believe she said that. Why would I be jealous? Because Seth is so brave, because he saw a ghost and we didn't. I shook my head. Do you believe that crazy story about a ghost sliding down the banister? I think he made it up. Well, Stephanie replied thoughtfully, we'll find out tomorrow night, won't we? Tomorrow night came too quickly. I had a maths test in the afternoon. I don't think I did too well in it. I couldn't stop thinking about Seth and Hill House and ghosts. After dinner, Mum cornered me in the living room. She had brushed back my hair and studied my face. Why do you look so tired? She asked. You have dark circles around your eyes. I think you should go to bed early tonight, Dad chimed in. Dad always thinks that everyone should go to bed early. So I went to my room at 9:30, but of course I didn't go to sleep. I read a book and listened to a tape on my Walkman and waited for Mum and Dad to go to bed and watched the clock. Mum and Dad are very heavy sleepers. You can pound and pound on their bedroom door and they don't wake up. They once slept through a hurricane. That's the truth. They didn't hear the tree that fell onto our house. Stephanie's parents are heavy sleepers too. That's why it's easy for the two of us to sneak out of our bedroom windows. That's why it's so easy for us to haunt our neighbourhood at night. As the clock neared midnight, I wished we were going out on one of our usual haunting trips. I wished we were going to hide under Chrissy Jacobs' window and howl like wolves. And then toss rubber spiders into Ben Fuller's bed, but Stephanie had decided that was too boring. We needed excitement. We needed to go ghost hunting with a strange kid we'd never seen before. At 10 to 12, I pulled on my down coat and crept out of my bedroom window. Another cold, windy night. I felt sprinkles of frozen rain on my forehead, so I pulled up my hood. Stephanie was waiting for me at the bottom of the driveway. She had pulled her brown hair back in a ponytail. Her coat was open. She wore a heavy ski sweater underneath, pulled down over her jeans. She raised her head and let out a ghostly howl. Oh! I clapped my hand over her open mouth. You'll wake up the whole block. She laughed and backed away from me. I'm a little excited, aren't you? She opened her mouth in another howl. The frozen rain pattered on the ground. We hurried towards Hill House. The swirling wind scattered twigs and dead leaves as we walked. Most of the house lights had been turned off. A car rolled by slowly as we turned onto Hill Street. Stephanie and I ducked behind a hedge. The driver might wonder why two kids were wandering around Wheeler Falls at midnight. I wondered too. We waited for the car to disappear, then we continued our journey. Our trainers crunched over the hard ground as we climbed the hill that led to the old haunted house. Hill House rose above us like a silent monster waiting to swallow us up. The last tour had ended. The lights were all off. Otto and Edna and the other tour guides were probably at home by now. Come on, Dwayne, hurry, Stephanie urged. She started to run around the side of the house. Seth is probably waiting. Wait up, I cried. We followed a narrow dirt path around to the back. Squinting into the darkness, I searched for Seth. No sign of him. The back garden was cluttered with equipment of all kinds. A row of rusted metal rubbish bins formed a fence along one wall. A long wooden ladder lay on its side in the tall weeds. Wooden crates and barrels and cardboard boxes were strewn everywhere. A hand lawnmower tilted against the house. It's so much darker back here, Stephanie stammered. Do you see Seth? I can't see anything, I replied in a whisper. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he isn't coming. Stephanie started to reply, but a choked cry from the side of the house made us both jump. We turned to see Seth stagger into view. His blonde hair was wild, flying around his face. His eyes bulged. His hands gripped his throat. The ghost! He cried, stumbling clumsily. The ghost! He got me! Then Seth collapsed at our feet and didn't move. Nice try, Seth, I said calmly. Nice fool, Stephanie added. He raised his head slowly, staring up at us. You mean I didn't fool you? No way, I replied. Stephanie rolled her eyes. That's joke number 1, she told Seth. Dwayne and I have pulled that one 1,000 times. Seth climbed to his feet and brushed off the front of his black turtleneck. He scowled, disappointed. Just trying to give you a little scare. You'll have to do better than that, I told him. Dwayne and I are experts at giving scares, Stephanie added. It's sort of our hobby. Steph straightened his hair with both hands. You two are weird, he murmured. I brushed cold raindrops off of my eyebrows. Can we get inside? I asked impatiently. Seth led the way to the narrow door at the far side of the house. Did you two have any trouble sneaking out? He asked, whispering. No trouble, Stephanie told him. Neither did I, he replied. He stepped up to the door and lifted the wooden latch. I took the tour again tonight, he whispered. Otto showed me some new things, some new rooms we can explore. Great, Stephanie exclaimed. Do you promise we'll see a real ghost? Seth turned back to her. A strange smile spread over his face. Promise, he said. Seth gave the door a tug. It creaked open. We slid inside, into total blackness, too dark to see where we were. I took a few steps into the room and bumped into Seth. Shh, he warned. Manny the night watchman is posted in the front rooms. He's probably asleep already, but we'd better stay in the back. Where are we? I whispered. In one of the back rooms, Seth whispered. Wait a few seconds. Our eyes will adjust. Can we turn on a light? I asked. Ghosts won't come out in the light, Seth replied. We had closed the door behind us, but a cold wind still blew at my back. I shivered. A soft rattling sound made my breath catch in my throat. Was I starting to hear things? I pulled off my hood to hear better. Silence now. I think I know where I can find some candles, Seth whispered. You two wait here. Don't move. Don't worry, I stammered. I didn't plan to go anywhere until I could see. I heard Seth move away, making soft, scraping footsteps over the floor, keeping as quiet as he could. His footsteps faded into silence. Then I felt another rush of cold wind against the back of my neck. Oh, I cried out when I heard the rattling again, a gentle rattling, like the rattling of bones. Another cold gust of wind swept over me, a ghost's cold breath, I thought. My whole body shook as a chill ran down my back. I heard the rattling bones again, louder, a chattering sound. So close. I reached out in the thick blackness, tried to grab onto the wall, or a table, or anything, but my hands grabbed only air. I swallowed hard. Calm down, Dwayne, I ordered myself. Seth will be back in a moment with some candles. Then you'll see that everything is okay. But another jangle and clatter of bones made me gasp. Steph, did you hear that? I whispered. No reply. A cold wind tingled my neck. The bones rattled again. Steph, did you hear that noise too? Steph! No reply. Stephanie! Steph! I called. She was gone. Panic time. My breaths came short and fast. My heart clattered louder than the skeleton bones. My whole body began to shake. Stephanie, Steph, where are you? I choked out weakly. Then I saw the two yellow eyes moving towards me. Two glowing eyes floating silently, gleaming with evil, coming nearer, nearer. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't see anything but those two gleaming yellow eyes. Oh! I uttered a moan as they floated closer, and could only see them more clearly. See that they were candle flames. Two candle flames moving side by side in the soft yellow light. I saw Seth's face and Stephanie's. They each carried a lit candle in front of them. Stephanie, where were you? I cried in a choked whisper. I thought... I went with Seth, she replied calmly. The orange glow from her candle washed over me. I guess Stephanie could see how panicked I was. I'm sorry, Dwayne, she said softly. I said I was going with Seth. I thought you heard me. Something is rattling, I stammered. Bones, I think. I keep feeling a cold wind and I keep hearing... Seth handed me a candle. Light it, he instructed. We'll look around, see what's rattling. I took the candle and raised it to his, but my hand was shaking so badly it took me 5 tries to light the wick. Finally the candle flamed to life. I gazed around in the flickering orange light. Hey, we're in the kitchen, Stephanie whispered. A gust of cold wind blew past me. Did you feel that? I cried. Seth pointed his candle flame towards the kitchen window. Look, Dwayne, that window pane, it's missing. The cold air is blowing in through the hole. Oh, right. Another blast of air, and then the rattling. Did you hear it? I demanded. Stephanie giggled. She pointed to the kitchen wall. In the dim light, I saw big pots and pans hanging on the wall. The wind is making them rattle, Stephanie explained. Ha ha. I uttered a feeble laugh. I knew that. I was just trying to scare you, I lied. You know, give you a thrill. I felt like a total idiot. But why should I admit that a load of pots and pans on the wall nearby had me scared out of my skin? Okay, no more jokes, Stephanie insisted, turning to Seth. We want to see a real ghost. Follow me. I'll show you something that Otto told me about, Seth whispered. Holding his candle in front of him, he led the way across the kitchen to the wall beside the stove. He lowered his candle in front of a cabinet door. Then he pulled open the cabinet door and moved the candle closer so he could see inside. "Why are you showing us a kitchen cabinet?" I demanded. "What's scary about that?" "It's not a cabinet," Seth replied. "It's a dumbwaiter. Watch." He reached inside and pulled a rope beside the cabinet shelf. The shelf began to slide up. He raised the shelf, then lowered it. "See? This dumbwaiter is like a tiny lift. It was used to send food from the kitchen to the master bedroom upstairs." "You mean for midnight snacks?" I joked. Seth nodded. The cook would put the food on the shelf, then he'd pull the rope, and the shelf would carry it upstairs. "Thrills and chills," I said sarcastically. "Yeah, why are you showing it to us?" Stephanie demanded. Seth brought the candle up close to his face. "Otto told me that this dumbwaiter is haunted. 120 years ago, things suddenly started to go wrong with it." Stephanie and I moved closer. I lowered my candle and examined the dumbwaiter. "What went wrong?" I asked. "Well," Seth began softly, "the cook would put food on the shelf and send it upstairs. When the shelf reached the bedroom up there, the food was gone." Stephanie narrowed her eyes at Seth. "It disappeared between the ground and the first floor?" Seth nodded solemnly. His grey eyes glowed in the soft candlelight. "This happened several times. When the shelf reached the first floor, it was empty. The food had vanished." "Ow," I murmured. "The cook became very frightened," Seth continued. "He was afraid that the dumbwaiter had become haunted. He decided to stop using it, and he ordered everyone on his staff never to use the dumbwaiter again." "And that's the end of the story?" I asked. Seth shook his head. "And then something horrible happened." Stephanie's mouth dropped open. What happened?" "Some kids were visiting the house. One of them was a boy named Jeremy. Jeremy was a real show-off, and very athletic. When he saw the dumbwaiter, he decided it would be fun to ride it to the first floor." "Oh, whoa," Stephanie murmured. I felt a chill. I thought I could guess what was coming. So, Jeremy squeezed onto the shelf, and one of the other kids pulled the rope. Suddenly, the rope caught. The kid couldn't get it to move up or down. Jeremy was stuck somewhere between the floors. The other kids called up to him, "Are you okay?" But Jeremy didn't reply. They started to get very worried. They tugged and tugged, but they couldn't move the rope. Then suddenly the shelf came crashing back down. "And was Jeremy on it?" I asked eagerly. Seth shook his head. There were 3 covered bowls on the shelf. The kids lifted the lid off the first bowl. Inside was Jeremy's heart, still beating. They opened the second bowl. Inside were Jeremy's eyes, still staring in horror. And they opened the third bowl and saw Jeremy's teeth, still chattering. The 3 of us stood silent in the orange glow of candlelight. We stared at the dumbwaiter. I shivered. The pots rattled against the wall, but I was no longer frightened of them. I raised my eyes to Seth. "Do you think the story is true?" Stephanie laughed. Nervous laughter. "It can't be true," she said. Seth's face remained solemn. "Do you believe any of Otto's stories?" he asked me quietly. "Well, yes. No. Some." I couldn't decide. "Otto swears the story is true," Seth insisted. "But of course, he may just be doing his job. His job is to make the house as scary as possible." "And Otto is a great storyteller," Stephanie murmured. "But enough stories. I want to see a real ghost." "Follow me," Seth replied. His candle flame dipped low as he spun around. He led us back through the kitchen, into a long, narrow room at the back. "This is the old butler's pantry," he announced. "All of the food for the house was stored in here." Stephanie and I stepped past him, raising our candles to see the room better. When I turned around, Seth was closing the pantry door behind us. Then I saw him turn the lock. "Hey, what are you doing?" I cried. "Why are you locking us in here?" Stephanie demanded. I dropped my candle. It bounced on the hard floor and the flame went out. The candle rolled under a shelf. When I glanced back up, Stephanie was storming towards Seth. Seth, what are you doing? She demanded angrily. Unlock that door. This isn't funny. I gazed around the long, narrow room. Shelves from floor to ceiling on 3 walls. No windows. No other door to escape through. With a sharp cry, Stephanie grabbed for the door handle, but Seth moved quickly to block her way. Hey! I cried, my heart pounding. I stepped up beside Stephanie. What's the big idea, Seth? His silvery eyes glowed with excitement behind his candle flame. He stared back at us without speaking. The same cold stare I had seen on his face the night before. Stephanie and I took a step back, huddling close together. Sorry, guys, but I played a little trick on you, he said finally. Excuse me? Stephanie cried, more angry than frightened. What kind of trick? I asked. He pushed back his long, blonde hair with his free hand. A flickering candle sent shadows dancing across his face. My name isn't Seth, he said softly. So softly I could barely hear him. But, I stammered. My name is Andrew, he said. Stephanie and I both cried out in surprise. But Andrew is the name of the ghost, Stephanie protested. The ghost who lost his head. I am the ghost, he said softly. A dry laugh escaped his lips, more like a cough than a laugh. I promised you a real ghost tonight. Well, here I am. He blew out the candle, and he appeared to vanish with the light. But Seth, Stephanie started. Andrew, he corrected her. My name is Andrew. My name has been Andrew for more than 100 years. Let us out of here, I pleaded. We won't tell anyone we saw you. We won't. I can't let you go, he replied in a whisper. I remembered the story of the sea captain's ghost. When Andrew stumbled into the sea captain's room and saw the old ghost, the sea captain had said the same thing to him. Now that you have seen me, I can never let you go. You lost your head, I blurted out. So you can't be Andrew, Stephanie cried. You have a head. In the dim light from Stephanie's candle, I could see the sneer spread over Andrew's face. No, he said softly. No. I do not have my head. This is one that I borrowed. He raised both hands to the side of his face. Here, let me show you, he said. Then he pressed his hands against his cheek and started to tug the head up from the black turtleneck. No! Stop! Stephanie screeched. I shut my eyes. I didn't really want to see him pull off his head. When I opened my eyes, Andrew had lowered his hands. I gazed once again around the narrow pantry. How could we escape? How could we get out of there? The ghost was blocking the only exit. Why did you trick us? Stephanie asked Andrew. Why did you bring us here? Why did you lie to us? Andrew sighed. I told you I borrowed this head. He ran one hand through the hair, then down the other cheek, as if petting it. I borrowed it, but I have to return it. Stephanie and I stared back at him in silence, waiting for him to continue, waiting for him to explain. I saw you last night in the tour group, he said finally, his eyes locked on me. The others couldn't see me, but I made myself visible to you. Why? I asked in a trembling voice. Because of your head, he replied. I liked your head. Huh? A frightened gasp escaped my throat. He gripped the blonde hair again. I have to return this head, Dwayne, he said calmly, coldly. So I'm going to take yours. A frightened giggle escaped my throat. Why do people suddenly start laughing when they're terrified? I guess it's because if you don't laugh, you'll scream, or explode or something. Trapped in that small, dark room with a 100-year-old ghost that wanted my head, I felt like laughing, screaming and exploding all at once. I stared hard at Andrew, squinting in the dim light. You're kidding, right? He shook his head. His silvery eyes narrowed, hard and cold. I need your head, Dwayne, he said softly. He shrugged, as if apologising. I'll pull it off quick. It won't hurt a bit. But I need it too, I spluttered. I'm only going to borrow it, Andrew said. He took a step towards us. I'll return it when I find my own head. Promise. You're not cheering me up, I replied. He took another step towards us. Stephanie and I backed up a step. He took a step. We backed up a step. We didn't have much more room to back up. We were nearly to the back wall of the pantry shelves. Suddenly, Stephanie spoke up. "Andrew, we'll find your head," she offered. Her voice shook. I turned to her. I'd never seen her scared before. Knowing that Stephanie was scared made me even more scared. "For sure," I croaked. We'll find your real head. We'll search all night. We know this house really well. I'm sure we can find it if you give us a chance." He stared back at us without replying. I wanted to get down on my knees and beg him to give us a chance. But I was afraid if I got down on my knees, he'd pull off my head. "We'll find it, Andrew. I know we will," Stephanie insisted. He shook his head. His borrowed head. "There's no way," he murmured sadly. "How long have I been searching this house? For more than 100 years. For more than 100 years I've searched every hallway, every room, every closet." He took another step closer. His eyes were locked on my head. I knew he was studying it, thinking about how it would look on his shoulders. "In all these years I haven't found my head," Andrew continued. "So what makes you think you can find it tonight?" Well, Stephanie turned to me. Maybe we'll get lucky," I declared. "Lame. How lame can you get?" "Sorry," Andrew murmured. "I need your head, Dwayne. We're wasting time." "Give us a chance," I cried. He took a step closer. He was studying my hair now, probably deciding if he should let it grow longer. "Andrew, please," I begged. But it was no use. His eyes were glassy now. He reached out both hands and took another step. Stephanie and I backed up. "Give me your head, Dwayne," the ghost whispered. My back bumped a shelf on the wall behind me. "I need your head, Dwayne." Stephanie and I huddled close and pressed our backs against the shelves. The ghost floated closer, hands outstretched. We pressed ourselves tighter against the shelves. My elbow bumped something hard. I heard some heavy objects fall from the shelf. "I need your head, Dwayne." He clenched and unclenched his hands. 2 more steps and he'd be close enough to grab me. "Your head! Give me your head!" I jammed my back against the shelves. I heard a creaking sound and the shelf started to slide. I stumbled back and realised that the whole wall was sliding. What's happening?" I stammered. The ghost reached for my head. "Gotcha!" The ghost leaped at me, hands outstretched. I ducked and stumbled back as the wall slid away. The wall made a loud grinding sound as it slowly spun around. Stephanie fell to the hard floor. I pulled her up quickly, as Andrew made another wild grab for my head. "A tunnel!" I shouted over the grinding of the wall. As the wall spun away, it revealed a dark opening, just big enough to squeeze through. I pulled Stephanie to the opening, and we squeezed inside. We found ourselves in a long, low passageway, some kind of a tunnel, hidden beneath the sliding wall. I'd always heard about old houses that had secret halls and hidden rooms, but I never thought I'd be so glad to find one. Stephanie and I started to run. Our footsteps echoed loudly on the concrete floor. We ran past bare concrete walls, cracked and pitted by time. We had to stoop as we ran. The ceiling wasn't as tall as we were. Stephanie slowed down to glance back. "Is he following us?" "Just keep running," I cried. "This tunnel has got to lead out of here, out of this house. It's got to." "I can't see where it leads," she replied breathlessly. The low tunnel stretched out in a straight line. I could see only darkness at the end. Did it stretch on forever? If it did, I'd keep running forever. I didn't plan to stop running until I was safely outside, and once I was outside, I planned never to visit Hill House again. And I planned to stay away from ghosts and to keep my head on my shoulders where it belonged. Big plans, but plans don't always work out. "Oh!" Stephanie and I both cried out as we nearly crashed into a solid concrete wall. The tunnel ended. It just ended. It doesn't go anywhere, I gasped. Breathing hard, I pounded both fists against the wall. Who would build a secret tunnel that leads nowhere? "Push on the wall," Stephanie cried. "Let's both push. Maybe this wall will slide open too." We turned and leaned our shoulders into the wall and pushed. Groaning and gasping, I pushed with all my strength. I was still pushing when I heard the scraping footsteps move towards us down the tunnel. "Andrew! Push!" Stephanie cried. We shoved ourselves against the wall. "Come on, slide, slide!" I ordered it. I glanced back and saw Andrew jogging slowly, steadily towards us. "We're trapped," Stephanie moaned. She collapsed against the wall with a sigh. Andrew came trotting closer. "Dwayne, I want your head," he called, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. "Trapped," Stephanie murmured. "Maybe not," I choked out. I pointed into the dark corner. "Look, a ladder!" "Huh?" Stephanie leaped to her feet. She squinted at the ladder. A metal ladder, the rungs blanketed with dust. It led straight up, through a small, square opening in the low ceiling. To where? "Give me your head," the ghost called. I grabbed the side of the metal ladder. I raised a foot to the first rung and peered straight up into thick blackness. I couldn't see a thing up there. "Dwayne," Stephanie whispered, "we don't know where it leads." "It doesn't matter," I replied, starting to climb. "We don't have a choice, do we?" "Where are you going, Dwayne? I need your head." I ignored the ghost's shout and scrambled up the ladder. Stephanie kept bumping me from behind. My trainers slipped on the thick dust. My hands slid over the cold metal railings. "Dwayne, you can't get away," Andrew called from down below. Straight up the ladder. Stephanie and I breathing hard, climbing frantically as fast as we could climb. Straight up, until the ladder started to tilt. "No!" I uttered a scream as it spilled forward. A crumbling, cracking noise drowned out my scream. It took me a few seconds to realise that the wall was breaking apart, crumbling into powdery chunks, and we were falling. I heard Stephanie scream. I grabbed the metal railings with both hands and held on tight, but the ladder was sailing down now, tumbling over the cracking, crumbling old wall. "Oh!" I landed hard, bounced once, twice. My hands flew up as I was tossed off the ladder. I rolled onto my stomach, rolled in the chunks of dirt and concrete of the broken wall. Stephanie landed on her knees. She shook her head, dazed. Chunks of wall spilled around us. Stephanie's hair was covered in dust. I shielded my eyes and waited for the wall to stop crumbling down. When I opened my eyes, Andrew stood above me. His hands were balled into fists, his mouth hung open, and he was staring past me. I struggled to my feet, turned to see what he was staring at. "A hidden room," Stephanie cried, moving beside me. "A room behind the old wall." Slipping over the chunks of broken concrete, I took a few steps closer to the room, and I saw what Andrew was staring at. A head. A boy's head laying on the floor of the hidden room. "I don't believe it," Stephanie gasped. "We found it. We actually found it." I swallowed hard and took a careful step forward. The head was pale, shimmering white, even in the dim light. I could see clearly that it was a boy's head, but the long, wavy hair had turned to white. The round eyes glowed green, sparkling like emeralds in the shimmering pale face. "The ghost head," I murmured. I turned back to Andrew. "Your head. We found it for you." I expected to see a smile on his face. I expected him to shout or jump for joy. For 100 years he had waited for this happy moment, and now his long search was over. But to my shock, Andrew's face was twisted in horror. He wasn't even looking at his long-lost head. He stared above it, and as he stared, his entire body began to quiver. Frightened cries escaped his lips. "Andrew, what is your problem?" I demanded. But I don't think he even heard me. He stared up at the ceiling, trembling. Hands balled into tight fists at his side. Then, slowly, he raised one hand and pointed. "No!" he moaned. "Oh, no!" I turned to see what had frightened him. Turned in time to see a filmy figure float down from the ceiling. At first I thought it was a thin window curtain falling from above, but as it curled slowly, softly to the floor, I saw that it had arms and legs. I could see right through it. The air around us suddenly grew cold. It's a ghost!" Stephanie cried, grabbing my arm. The ghost landed softly, silently on the floor of the hidden room, raising its arms like birds' wings. Stephanie and I both gasped as it raised its arms and stood upright. It was short and very thin. It wore baggy, old-fashioned-looking trousers and a long-sleeved shirt with a high collar. A high collar. A collar and no head. The ghost had no head. I felt a burst of cold air as it bent down, shimmering, bending as if made of a soft gauze. It reached down, lifted the head off the floor, lifted the head to the stiff, tall collar, gently pressing the head into place. And as the head touched the ghostly, gauzy neck, the green eyes flashed, the cheeks twitched, the pale white eyebrows arched up and down, and then the mouth moved. The ghost turned to us, to Stephanie and me, and the lips moved in a silent, "Thank you, thank you." And then the arms rose into the air, its green eyes still on us. The ghost floated up into the air, lighter than air. It floated silently up. I watched in amazement, my heart pounding, until the ghostly figure vanished in the darkness. And then Stephanie and I both turned to Andrew at the same time. We had just seen the headless ghost. We had just seen Andrew, the boy from 100 years ago. We had just watched him collect his head. But the boy who claimed to be Andrew was still there. He stood behind us, still trembling, his eyes wide, staring into the hidden room, making soft, swallowing sounds. I narrowed my eyes at him. "If you aren't Andrew," I started, "if you aren't the headless ghost, then who are you?" Stephanie turned on the boy too. "Yeah, who are you?" she asked angrily. "If you're not the headless ghost, why did you chase us?" I demanded. "Well, the boy raised both hands as if surrendering. Then he started to back away. He had only gone 3 or 4 steps when we heard footsteps coming down the long tunnel. I turned to Stephanie. "Another ghost?" "Who's in here?" the deep voice boomed. I saw a circle of light from a torch sweeping over the tunnel floor. "Who's here?" the voice repeated. I recognized the deep voice. "Otto." Back here," the boy called softly. "Seth, is that you?" The circle of light floated closer. Otto appeared behind it, squinting at us. "What's going on? What are you doing back here? This part of the house is dangerous. It's all falling apart." "Well, we were exploring," Seth started, "and we got lost. It really wasn't our fault." Otto gazed at Seth sternly. Then his face filled with surprise as his torch washed over Stephanie and me. "You two? How did you get in? What are you doing here?" He let us in," I answered. I pointed at Seth. Otto turned back to Seth and shook his head unhappily. "More of your tricks? Were you scaring these kids?" "Not really, Uncle Otto," Seth replied, keeping his eyes on the ground. Uncle Otto? So Seth was Otto's nephew. No wonder he knew so much about Hill House. "Tell the truth, Seth," Otto insisted. "Were you pretending to be a ghost again? Haven't you played that trick on enough kids? Haven't you scared enough kids to death?" Seth stood silent. Otto rubbed his hand back over his smooth, bald head. Then he let out a weary sigh. "We have a business to run here," he told Seth. "Do you want to scare my customers away? Do you want to get the whole neighborhood upset?" Seth lowered his head and still didn't reply. I could see that he was in major trouble, so I decided to jump in. "It's okay, Otto," I said. "He didn't scare us." "That's right," Stephanie chimed in. "We didn't believe he was a ghost, did we, Dwayne?" "Of course not," I replied. "He didn't fool us for even a minute." "Especially when we saw the real ghost," Stephanie added. Otto turned to her, studying her in the light from the torch. "The what?" "The real ghost," Stephanie insisted. "We saw the real ghost, Uncle Otto," Seth exclaimed. "It was awesome." Otto rolled his eyes. "Save the joke, Seth. It's too late at night. You're just trying to get out of trouble." "No, really," I insisted. "Really," Seth and Stephanie cried. "We saw the headless ghost, Uncle Otto." "You've got to believe us," Seth pleaded. Sure," Otto murmured. He turned and motioned with his torch. "Come on, everyone, out." After our scary night at Hill House, Stephanie and I gave up haunting the neighborhood. It just wasn't that exciting anymore, especially since we'd seen a real ghost. We stopped sneaking out at night. We stopped peeking into kids' windows in scary masks. We stopped hiding behind the bushes and howling like werewolves in the middle of the night. We gave up all the scary stuff, and we never even talked about ghosts. Stephanie and I found other things to be interested in. I tried out for the basketball team at school and became a forward player. Stephanie joined the theatre arts club. This spring she's going to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Either Dorothy or a munchkin. We had a good winter. Lots of snow. Lots of unscary fun. Then, late one evening, we were heading home from a birthday party. It was the first warm night of spring. Tulips were blooming in some of the front gardens we passed. The air smelled fresh and sweet. I stopped in front of Hill House and gazed up at the old mansion. Stephanie stopped beside me. She read my mind. "You want to go in, don't you, Dwayne?" I nodded. "How about taking the tour? We haven't been in there since—" My voice trailed off. "Hey, why not?" Stephanie replied. We climbed the steep hill. Tall weeds brushed my legs of my jeans as we made the way to the front door. The huge old house stood as dark and as creepy as ever. As Stephanie and I climbed onto the front doorsteps, the door creaked open, as it always had. We stepped into the small front entryway. A few seconds later, Otto bounced into view, dressed all in black, a friendly smile on his round, bald head. "You two!" he exclaimed happily. "Welcome back!" He called into the front room. "Edna, come and see who's here!" Edna came tottering into the room. "Oh my!" she cried, pressing a hand against her pale, wrinkled face. "We were wondering if we would see you two again." I gazed into the front room. No other customers. "Could you take us on a tour?" I asked Otto. He smiled his toothy smile. "Of course. Wait while I get my lantern." Otto took us around Hill House. He gave us the complete tour. It was great to see the house again, but it no longer held any secrets for Stephanie and me. After the tour, we thanked Otto and said good night. We were halfway down the hill when a police car pulled up to the curb. A dark, uniformed officer stuck his head out of the passenger window. "What were you kids doing up there?" he called. Stephanie and I made our way down to the police car. The two officers eyed us suspiciously. "We just took the tour," I explained, pointing up to the Hill House. "Tour? What tour?" the officer demanded gruffly. "You know, the haunted house tour," Stephanie replied impatiently. The police officer stuck his head further out of the window. He had blue eyes and freckles all over his face. "What were you really doing up there?" he asked softly. "We told you," I said shrilly. "Taking the tour, that's all." Behind the wheel, the other policeman chuckled. "Maybe a ghost gave them the tour," he told his partner. "There are no tours," the freckled-faced officer said, frowning. "There haven't been any tours in that house for months." Stephanie and I both uttered cries of surprise. "The house is empty," the police officers continued. "Shut down. There hasn't been anyone in there all winter. Hill House went out of business 3 months ago." "Huh?" Stephanie and I exchanged startled glances. Then we both turned to gaze up at the house. The grey stone turrets rose up into the purple-black sky. Nothing but darkness all around. And then I saw a trail of soft light across the front window. Lantern light. Orange and soft as smoke. In the soft light, I saw Otto and Edna. They floated in front of the window. I could see right through them, as if they were made of gauze. They're ghosts too, I realized, staring into the soft, smoky light. I blinked, and the light faded out. And so concludes The Headless Ghost by R.L.Stine. If you've enjoyed this audiobook, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, a like, or perhaps even subscribe. For more Goosebump related content and updates about future releases, and also to have your say in what Goosebump book I should read next, check out my Instagram @KinoReads.